Everybody in that building is dead. Um, they will lose other decision-making centers as this if these strikes continue to
Do we
escalate.
know if NATO? This is, of course, we heard reports months ago of major attacks after the last round of these style attacks, where Putin launched on these decision-making centers, a bunker outside of Kiev, specifically being hit with NATO decision makers in there. Do we know? Are these just Ukrainians? Are they NATO as well? U.S. intelligence that we won't hear about that are also hitting these attacks? Anything you know about that?
Well, I think the number that was put out on the previous one, which I think took place near Lvov in western Ukraine, was 200 to 300. Now, that's just a ridiculously high number. If you take a look at the documents that were leaked by this airman in Massachusetts, um, the documents acknowledge that there are boots on the ground. Over, I think, 100 Americans are on the ground. Most of them rotate in and out of Ukraine. Many of them work out of the embassy. Um, Is it possible that Americans or NATO designated personnel are in these bunkers? Yes, that is a possibility. But to put 200 to 300 is ridiculous. One, in this day and age of connectivity, real time connectivity, you don't need to go through that risk. You can keep these people in Poland and maintain the connectivity with the Ukrainians without putting these people at risk. Um, so while I do believe that there have been casualties and there are some credible reports coming out about casualties, I think the casualties that are taking place are on personnel that are providing critical logistics support. Billions of dollars of military equipment has been provided to the Ukrainians. This is a logistical nightmare, a maintenance nightmare, and an accounting nightmare. And so I think you have NATO resources pushed forward to support this logistical effort, not planning for the battle that's taking place outside of Ukraine. But there have to be people on the ground to assist Ukraine in dealing with the um, basically the mountain of logistical support requirements that have been accrued because of this. And I think these
Yeah.
are the people that have suffered casualties. And I do believe that there have been dead, and I do believe there have been wounded on the part of active duty NATO personnel. Whether or not this includes Americans, I can't say.
Victoria Nuland last week admitted that for the past 4 to 5 months, the United States has been actively involved in the planning process of this counteroffensive, despite New York Times reports, despite Politico reports that say they're frustrated because Ukraine just won't share any information about their spring offensive, their summer offensive, which we found laughable here on this show. And Victoria Nuland then confirmed that the United States, NATO, has been actively involved in this spring offensive planning for 4 to 5 months. She said this publicly. So where are we with this offensive? What do you think we're going to see as we see these little pinprick mosquito bite attacks and drone strike attacks right now? The pressure, of course, is on for this somehow counteroffensive. What do you think we're going to see?
Well, we know that the forces that were allocated for this offensive, and we know this not just from the leaked documents, but just because of public statements, 9 to 12 brigades worth of Ukrainian forces have been equipped and trained by NATO and their non-NATO European allies since the fall of last year, and that these brigades are by and large ready on paper. But as I mentioned to you, these brigades have incorporated um, a sustainability nightmare. You have different kinds of tanks, different kinds of armored fighting vehicles, different kinds of artillery, um, all of which have their own logistical tales. Each one is which is different. I will tell you this: if the United States tried to carry out an offensive operation using 12 brigades that were organized in this fashion with differing equipment and support, we couldn't do it. And we're the best army in the world. We couldn't do it. Now we expect the Ukrainians somehow to be able to do this with troops that are not properly trained, they're not properly led, they're not properly motivated. Um, we've taken them. It took me 2.5 years as a Marine working with the best people in the world, U.S. Marines, to master the art of combined arms maneuver warfare through nonstop live fire training in 29 Palms, California in the 1980s. And I will tell you that if we had ceased training for any period of time, 2 to 6 months, our effectiveness would have plummeted. You have to constantly train to maintain this skill set. Um, We've taken select Ukrainian forces and run them through a very shortened, abbreviated training course in Germany on combined arms combat. It's a joke, literally a joke. No American soldier could go through that training and be considered combat capable. And yet we've taken the Ukrainians, we've married them up with this disparate set of equipment, and we're saying you must now carry out a counteroffensive against an army that defines itself by the defense, and that's Russian, the Russian army, the best defensive army in the world. And so if everything was going Ukraine's way, this counteroffensive would have no chance of ever succeeding. But everything's not going their way. The Russians have, over the course of the year, mastered their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, their satellites, their aircraft, their electronic warfare. They are tracking this material and they are taking it out. All of the logistics support, the fuel, the ammunition, everything, spare parts that gets accumulated in warehouses, these warehouses are being taken out. The Ukrainians have zero capacity to carry out any meaningful counteroffensive, and it's been hampered even more by the battle for Bakhmut. The Russians killed 75,000 Ukrainians in this battle. I just want to make that number out there again so people understand what the heck just happened. 75,000 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. 60,000 of these soldiers represents the size of the Ukrainian counteroffensive force. So the 60,000 troops that NATO trained for this counteroffensive are no longer available for the counteroffensive because 75,000 Ukrainians died in the Bakhmut area. These troops now have to fill that gap. There are no troops available for a meaningful counteroffensive. And if the Ukrainians attempt to do something to pull forces out, to cobble together some sort of desperate attack, it won't even be Battle of the Bulge like, because they won't get the penetration of the Russian lines. They'll be slaughtered before they get there, and then there's nothing left. And this is what the Ukrainian generals are trying to tell Zelenskyy right now: is stop playing politics with the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. You already did that in Bakhmut. We told you not to commit to this battle. 75,000 soldiers are dead. That's dead. That means about 150,000 are wounded. That's a lot of guys that are no longer available to be on the front lines fighting. Jeez. The Ukrainians are having trouble getting manpower. They're scooping old men. They're recruiting 16 and 17-year-olds. They're running around hijacking people off the streets. What do you think the motivation factor is of a man who thought he was going home to his family, getting hit, put in a car, thrown in 4 days later with no training, told you're going in the front line? You think he's ready to give his life for his country? He's going to, but he's not going to be able to give it in the way that the Ukrainians would like, with zeal and aggressiveness and going forward. He's going to give it cowering in a trench, saying, what the hell am I doing here? I don't know how to use this weapon. And the Russian artillery is raining down on me. The Ukrainians have no artillery ammunition left. Their air defense system is being destroyed as we speak. 2 of the 3 Patriot systems that have been provided are gone, off the table, not there anymore. Jeez. That's happening to the totality of the Ukrainian air defense. This war is all but over. There's a lot of fighting left to be done. But anybody who's waiting for a magical Ukrainian counteroffensive to suddenly turn the table, just like sanctions, it ain't working, guys. Russia has won this. We hear a lot of talk, the Ukrainians, they got new tanks. They didn't get any new tanks. The Challenger tanks provided by the British are old. The Leopard tanks provided by the Germans are old. You know what? The Russians right now are producing 100 advanced T-90 tanks a month. Wow. 100 a month. So while we're sitting here giving Ukraine, we're scraping the barrel to give Ukrainians things. For instance, F-16 fighters, 40-year-old aircraft. They're not new. They're not good. They're junk. And the aircraft the Ukrainians are going to get are all airplanes that have lost their operational expiration date. The Dutch were pretty much honest about it. They said, oh, we'll give you F-16s, but only after we can't use them anymore because they've passed their use-by date. Right. Then we'll give them to you. So this is the Ukrainian military with all these so-called magic weapons, none of which work. The Russians, everybody's saying, oh, they ran out of everything. They're not running out of anything. Their defense industry is mobilized. It's working. It's punching out stuff. They will never run out of missiles. They will never run out of artillery. They will never run out of tanks because, A, the Ukrainians aren't killing that many of them, and B, they're just building more and more and more. It's not just for Ukraine. People forget that Putin signed an order expanding the total Russian army to 1.5 million people. Finland, that just joined NATO, yeah, that's right, Finland. You got a 70,000 man Russian Army Corps being formed right now north of St. Petersburg. Fresh troops, fresh equipment, all because of you, Finland, because you decided to join NATO. They're going to be matched by another 30,000 up in the Kola Peninsula. That's 100,000 troops, Russian troops that didn't exist before. They exist now, and they're equipped with the best equipment in the world. And that goes for the totality of the Russian perimeter. This war has made Russia stronger militarily, economically, and most importantly, domestically, politically. I've never seen the Russian people so unified over being Russian than I saw them today.
And these leaders in the West continue to play politics with these people's lives, and these poor people continue to be killed. And now you're pulling young men out of colleges and off the streets in order to, in conscription and throwing them